Thanks so much, Mr. Chairman. And to our witnesses, welcome. I think it's great to have somebody on this particular subject whose last name is Waters. And I don't know how you figured that one out, Mr. Chairman. That's good staff work.
And she is a witness for the majority.
All right. Well, we look forward to what she has to say and our other witnesses. Martha Clark Metley, what was your middle name? Martha what? Martha. I'm married to a Martha Ann. Martha Ann. And it's always great to have a Martha on board, too. Frank, it's nice to see you again. Frank and I were actually in elementary school together, I think in the late 90s when I was governor. He was, I think, with the Department of Education. It's good to have you here as well. And we welcome Mr. Brown and Mr. Guild, too. Thank you for coming. The purpose of this hearing is to determine, quote, the appropriate role of states and the federal government in protecting groundwater. Important subject. And, but I say, frankly, I didn't know the role of states and the federal government in this regard were in question. For over 40 years, as far as I know, it's been perfectly clear what Congress intended. In part, that's because the language in the Clean Water Act is clear, crystal clear. The bottom line is this: if pollution travels from a defined point source, like a coal ash pond, to surface water by way of a direct hydrological connection, like groundwater, then the Clean Water Act regulates that pollution. That's not just me speaking. Justice Scalia agreed in his opinion in now famous Rapanos decision, and this is what Justice Scalia wrote, and I'm going to just quote him. The act does not forbid the addition of any pollutant directly to navigable waters from any point source, but rather the addition of any pollutant to navigable waters. Thus, from the time of the Clean Water Act's enactment, lower courts have held that the discharge into intermittent channels of any pollutant that naturally washes downstream likely violates Section 1311A, even if the pollutants discharged from a point source do not emit directly into covered waters, but pass through conveyances in between. Again, not my words, but the words of Justice Scalia. It seems to me that if the EPA is willing to rely on Justice Scalia's majority opinion about what constitutes the, quote, waters of the U.S., close quote, EPA should surely agree with him on this point, too. Justice Scalia also correctly noted the nearly unanimous agreement among the lower courts. Of course, it's not a real legal struggle when the law is so clear. The real role of courts in these cases is to parse the facts in each unique situation they face to determine whether the hydrological connection of point source with navigable water is clear enough for the Clean Water Act to apply. It's not hard for me to understand why some industries, such as oil, gas, utilities, mining, and others, might be interested in trying to inject some uncertainty into the question of whether or not to regulate pollution that flows from their leaky ponds and from their lagoons into the waters we depend on for drinking, for fisheries, for recreation. Citizens whose health and property values have been hurt by petroleum products or arsenic or mercury or lead and other toxic materials seeping into their waterways have exercised their invaluable right to sue under the Clean Water Act, where state agencies and EPA have failed to protect them adequately, and they're winning. Why? Because the law is clear, and they have the right to be heard. The only way to silence those in the public who have been harmed is if we, in Congress, choose to weaken the Clean Water Act and strip them of this ultimate tool to protect themselves. I cannot and will not support such an effort. Let me also add here that EPA cannot unilaterally change the law, no matter how passionately its leaders may wish to do so. Any change in the EPA's 40-year-old position that groundwater pollution can reach and contaminate surface water would be arbitrary, and the change would likely be overturned by the courts. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to welcome our witnesses here today. We welcome you all warmly. We look forward to hearing your testimonies and to the opportunity to discuss with you and our colleagues an important issue. Having said that, though, we should be aware that EPA is currently taking public comment on an important environmental issue that has been regarded as a matter of settled law for decades. That law essentially says this: if you are responsible for polluting our rivers, streams, lakes, and oceans by spilling, injecting, or leaking contaminants into groundwater, and that groundwater is hydrologically connected to surface water, then you're liable for that pollution, period. And I believe that law should not change. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.